So let's look at the history of elder abuse legislation. The history of national efforts to address elder abuse begins more than 50 years ago in 1950 when President Harry Truman called for the first National Conference on Aging. The next event occurred 12 years later in 1962 when amendments to the Social Security Act authorized payments to states for establishing protective service units. These units were intended to help vulnerable elders who were unable to manage on their own. It developed a system of services that provided not only social services but also legal assistance, in particular guardianship. 3 years later, in 1965, the 1965 Older Americans Act represented an attempt to address the rights and needs of older adults. The law provided assistance to states in developing programs to assist older adults. It did not specifically address elder abuse. As a result, many states mobilized to enact laws providing protective services to older adults. 9 long years later, in 1974, the Social Security Act authorized adult protective services under Title 20, which mandated protective service units in all states for adults over the age of 18. The target populations were people with mental and physical impairments who were unable to manage on their own and who had been or were being exploited or neglected. Some criticized these programs partly on the grounds of being too costly. In any event, building on this momentum, some states took the extra step of requiring mandatory reporting of elder abuse. In 1981, Congress considered legislation to establish a national center on elder abuse. However, the bill never reached the floor of Congress. Accordingly, many states continue to adopt their own statutes providing adult protective services delivered by state or local services agencies. In 1984, Congress passed the Victims' Crime Act to provide financial compensation to victims for the costs of health care and lost wages resulting from a crime. Although this law applied to crime victims in all age groups, it helped boost services to victims of elder abuse. In 1987, Congress enacted the Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act. The act mandated that nursing homes protect and preserve the quality of life of the residents. This broad statute resulted in regulations that specifically defined elder abuse in the context of long-term care facilities. It also mandated that states had the responsibility to investigate abuse allegations against facilities and instructed those facilities to train staff to prevent elder abuse. Also in 1987, Congress reauthorized the 1965 Older Americans Act, which defined and described elder abuse and provided for elder abuse prevention services by encouraging public education, identification of abuse, and methods for receiving reports of abuse. Unfortunately, Congress never appropriated funds for these services. As such, the law was a paper tiger. A review of the congressional history sadly reveals that from 1950 to 1987, the primary barrier to national elder abuse prevention was a lack of national funding. The National Center on Elder Abuse was launched. This center became permanent in the 1992 reauthorization of the Older Americans Act. Also in that time frame, the Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program was strengthened. Congress was beginning to show a commitment, albeit a small commitment, to elder abuse. In 1992, the Family Violence Prevention Services Act funded the National Elder Abuse Incident Study. The data from this study seemed to indicate that very few cases of elder abuse were ever reported to adult protective services or local authorities. In 1995, President Clinton announced the launch of a White House Conference on Aging, which produced 2 resolutions devoted solely to the protection of vulnerable older adults. On September 12, 2002, the Elder Justice Act was first introduced by co-sponsors Senator John Breaux, Democrat of Louisiana, and Senator Orrin Hatch, Republican of Utah. This bill was introduced in the 107th Congress and in each Congress thereafter. It was not passed until the 111th Congress as part of the Affordable Care Act. Why did the Elder Justice Act take 8 years to become law? Actually, this was due to a combination of factors. In at least 2 congressional sessions, the bill became a political football as individual senators blocked the bill from coming to the floor for a vote. This was done for one of 2 reasons. First, to gain leverage for the consideration of other legislation, or second, out of concern for the potential costs of this bill. At one point, victory seemed close when the Senate Finance Committee added the bill to a must-pass tax bill, but the provisions were dropped in conference negotiations on the insistence of the House, which had not devoted the necessary time to study the issue. Also, some vocal legislators raised philosophical and political objections to a federal elder abuse statute. They believed that elder abuse and neglect should be treated as a private matter involving family and other systems of advocacy. Other legislators believed that national elder abuse legislation smacked of overregulation and creation of a new and unnecessary bureaucracy. Moreover, as Congress trained its national focus on terrorism, security concerns, and foreign affairs, the issue of elder abuse seemed less pressing. Lastly, Bush administration officials opposed any such federal legislation as they believed that sufficient programs and provisions were in place to deal with elder abuse on the state level, and therefore no further mandates were necessary. In January 2009, as the 111th Congress convened, many believed that finally the Elder Justice Act had a real chance of becoming law. This optimism was prompted by a confluence of events. First, the election of Senator Barack Obama as U.S. President. As a U.S. Senator, President Obama had co-sponsored the Elder Justice Act. Second, former White House Chief of Staff Rahm Emanuel had been the author of the Elder Justice Act bill on the House side. And third, Kathy Greenlee, a former long-term care ombudsman and advocate for elders justice, was named Assistant Secretary for Aging, Administration on Aging in the Department of Health and Human Services. It seemed the appropriate influence makers were finally in place. The House, in a dramatic partisan vote, passed the Senate version of the health care reform bill, including the bipartisan Elder Justice Act. The bill became law on March 23, 2010. As always, thank you to you, our viewers, for watching Your Money, Your Life. My name is Attorney Ramsey Bahrawy, building your trust.